In this video, I am going to show you guys step by step how to change a govern spring in a VE pump for a 12 valve Cummins. I've done this video before. It was an older video. I wanted to update it. So, all right, let's get into it. At this point, you probably should, this pump I don't care about because this pump is a core anyway. You want to brake clean everything off, blow dry it really well so you're not getting any dirt in the pump, because dirt in the pump is bad. So you don't want to get any dirt in the pump. Now your next step is you want to start marking some stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'll put the camera down for a minute and I'm going to mark a few things with my engraver. But I'm going to put a mark on this, which is actually a nut. On here to here, you'll see the marks when I get done. I'll show you the marks so that you can actually see what's going on, or you know where it needs to end up. And this will make your life easier. We'll pull this off and then I'm going to put another mark and I'll show you that as well. All right, so this is just a cheap engraver. You can buy them from all kinds of places. I think this one's from Canadian Tire, which is parts place or a hardware store here in Canada. So you can see where I engraved on this here. I engraved there just across so that you know where everything is. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull this off now. And then I'm going to put another mark so we know where the lever is indexed on there. But let me get that pulled off and then we'll do that. I don't know, it might be hard for you guys to see it, but engrave mark, they line up together. What you do now, you pull this spring off. If I can do this with one hand or not. Yep, I can. And then this lever pulls off. If you don't mark that or know where it is, where it was, sometimes you got to screw around to get it set back up. So if you mark it, or at the very least reference where it is, you can scribe it too. You don't have to use an engraver. And then this will all pull off here now. Or it's supposed to. There we go. So at the point where we are now, we need to loosen some Allen keys. So there's this Allen key, this one, and then this one. Now this is the hard one when the pump is on the truck, because lots of times this is in your way. So you want to have Allen keys that have the ball end on them. That'll tell you for sure. And sometimes you still have to monkey around. Sometimes you have to take this out, or have had to. It depends if the pump is shoved right up against the head, like we usually would normally do on one of these. Sometimes you have to loosen it and pull it back away to get it away. Just depends on the setup. But just if you have to do that, don't be worried about it. That sometimes you do have to do that. So what we're going to do now is pull these bolts out, and I'm going to lift the cover off, and we'll show you the spring setup and all that stuff in there. Like I said, this is not complicated. You can do it. So you can see now inside the pump, all I did was pull the pump cover up, and you will have, there's a detent. I don't have enough hands here, but I'll show you when I put it back together. You kind of have to monkey to get it back together, and sometimes you have to undo the full power screw to do it. Just depends. There again, it depends. Sometimes they fight you, sometimes they don't. But if you look inside, this spring I don't really care about because it's a stock one, but this spring here, maybe we get a little bit of light in there. You have to undo this spring from this clip. So I'll do that, and I will show you what the bits look like, and don't drop them. So I'm going to try to do this with one hand. Bear with me here. If you look inside there, you can see the... Oh man, I wish that light was in a better spot. Hold on, let me see if I can reposition the light here a bit. Might be really bright now, but... So you can see the end of the spring. So you have two options. You can either take it off this side. Also note which way the arm is facing here. Or you can take it off the other side. This one, I'm going to take off the cover side because I only got one hand to work with. And I use needle nose pliers. These just happen to be the ones that I happen to have right beside me. Okay, spring is off. Now, usually the pump is going to be standing up, obviously. Just, I only got one hand. So, at this point, there's a couple things that I would recommend doing. One, well, obviously you're switching the spring. You're switching the spring. Now, I would recommend buying a seal kit when you're doing this job if the pump is relatively old. I like to change this gasket here, this O-ring gasket. And then also there is an O-ring inside here. You pull this rod out. There we go. There you go. Oh, there it is. There's also an O-ring on here that likes to leak. So I like to change those as well. Comes in the kit. Like I said, there'll be a link in the description for all this stuff if you are so inclined that you would like to buy it from me. So just shove that in. Like I said, this is a core pump, so it doesn't, I'm not changing any of this stuff. So this is the bit that I was talking about here that you don't want to drop these pieces because there's a spring and a plate and parts that you don't want to drop. So I kind of need two hands for this. Hold on. Okay, so this little bit and piece here, you want to take the spring off. Let's use needle nose pliers. I have them right here. You just want to hold this piece that's in my right hand so that these pieces can't go anywhere. Pull your spring. I don't know what spring it is. It doesn't have the marking on it anymore. And these are the pieces that I was talking about you don't want to lose. So it's just that little plate, a spring, and then that, I don't know what you want to call it, retainer bolt. I'm sure there's actually a name for it. But inside here, these things are actually relatively simple. There's not a lot to them. Well, there is, but there's not. So now what you're going to do is we're just going to take this and go in the opposite direction. Now, what I did want to show, take this out of the way. One thing I would do when you have, obviously, well, I guess I shouldn't say that. If you have the pump off of the engine and you're doing this, I would replace this gasket as well. There's an O-ring inside here because the kit comes with that. I would do that as well. So, when you're going to put this back together, if you look, this pin right here, which is your full fuel adjustment, is it hits this right here, and it is spring loaded. And that's what you're going to fight with when you're putting this back together with the spring and everything. So the easiest way that I've found if it fights you is just to wind this out. So you just crack it loose, wind it out, and then put it back into the same spot if you're not trying to add fuel. If you're trying to add fuel, you can add more fuel. We'll talk about that in another video. But that is what you are going to fight when you go to put this back on, is this lever. Now, I have successively, lots of times, shoved this forwards with a screwdriver, slid it back down. It's just, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So let's see, without touching any of this stuff, see if I can get this back together, not on the truck, and kind of a hand and a half here. So the new spring, same idea. You're just going to want to put it back together. I don't know. No. Okay, so you take your pin, you're going to put it back into the hole and put your, like I said, you don't want to let go of any of this stuff. There you go. Get that back in there. And then you take your lid and you can stretch the spring a little bit. You don't want to overstretch it too much if you can help it, because you will distort the spring and screw it up. But you can stretch it a bit. Here we are. Put your spring back on. And like I said, this is the spot where you have to fight with that lever. So obviously it's easier when you don't have it on the truck because you can actually see everything. But usually the easiest way is just to turn that back out. Ouch. All right, it wants to fight me. So I'm just gonna loosen it off. And then we will do, I was saying, I wouldn't use an impact gun doing this. I'm going to because it's not attached to anything. So just pull that out. The kits do come with these O-rings as well, if you want to change the O-ring there. So if you do that, this will fall right back on for you. Okay. So now we got that down. There is one dowel. I guess I didn't show you that. There's one dowel in this corner. You need to get that dowel in. And that's part of the reason. It's probably because it's hard because of this one. So put the screws back in. I'll do that quick and I'll come back to you. Okay, so I got those bolts tight. Now we can put this back in again. And it does have this little, I don't know, it's actually a locating tab. I honestly don't know what it does, but there is a spot for it, so might as well have it in there, I guess. And it just goes to the inboard side of the pump. And then you can just tighten that back up again. All these things do not need to be super tight because everything's O-ringed. You will want it tight, but you don't want to over tighten it. I'm sure there's probably torque specs, but I've never actually used torque specs for it. But something you want to do, I'm going to be quiet here for a second, and I'm hoping you guys will hear this. So you want to be able to hear that stuff move. And when you do that, like when you turn this rod with your fingers, you'll feel this, there's some spring load to it. You want that because otherwise you can be on the wrong side of it. If it's not spring loaded, the govern does not work properly. So at this point, we want to put, basically just reassemble the stuff that we have on the bench here, right? So that's why I lay it out. All right, so you're going to take your pieces when you have them set out here. You have these pieces. Now, when you put this plate on, or this plastic piece on, you need to have your spring already, well, in there and not in there. So this is where this goes, but this actually holds that from moving. So you kind of have to put them together at the same time so everything fits in there as it's supposed to. Kind of like so. That's what it should look like. And then there's this piece that goes on top. Like so. And then you have your lever. Now this is where we marked it. And if I put the lever on properly, we are going to have that in the right spot. Now there is two things here. You have to get your spring in the right spot. So you have to wind your spring around and it hooks on this edge. And then you also have to line this up. So I need two hands to do that. Lined up. So one thing you want to notice or you want to pay attention to is this moves up and down. So sometimes when you're aligning this up, so usually what I do is I put this down where I want, get this spring so it's down over here. You can put it right on there too, but you get it down over here and then you get it lined up. And then what I do is I take the pliers, just very lightly put on the bottom of the threads here and just lift up and you'll feel it actually clip into it. You get it like that and then you can pull this spring around and hook it in. You could even put a piece of string or a little piece of wire or something on it to pull it around if you wanted to. Be very, very easy to do that. Not super complicated to do it. So now we have our lines marked up because we put this line on and we have that line. I don't know if you guys will be able to see that real well or not. I can see it quite easy. So that line and this line, we know that's lined up. And then you put your lock washer on, your plastic washer. your throttle lever, and then your nut. And then all you got to do is tighten this down, and you are ready to fire this thing back up. Now, something that I always do recommend to everybody when you're doing this stuff is have a runaway plate just in case. So pull your intake pipe off right at the injection pump and have a piece of 2x6, piece of steel plate, something substantial. I like using a 2x6 or a piece of 3/4 or a 3/8 plate is what I usually use. I got a pretty good sized chunk that you can stuff on a turbo or something like that. But I like to do it right at the intake. So if you fire this thing up and it decides that it wants to take off, you can shut her down and not have a problem. All right, so that's the conclusion of doing the work on the pump. If you guys are worried about it, like I said, I would run, pull your intake pipe off and have something so you can snuff the engine out just in case it decides it wants to run away. But if you've all done it properly, it shouldn't. That's just a precaution. So if you like this video, check out this video.